All right. Well, as people are hopping in live here or on wherever you are, if it's on social media, welcome. Thanks for joining the call today. Going to be releasing some exciting new features that Agent Legend has released recently, as well as Kee Technology has released that we've been working on. So it's not anything we've ever shared with anyone before, brand new stuff. So really excited to share this. So Steve, so excited for this chat. So before I dive into what we're doing on the back end, first, I'm curious, why did you create this new product and feature? Why did you see that there was a need for it?
Yeah. So, I mean, we've been in communications, drip texts, for years. Rising text costs, the overhead that's incurred with those, and now just with how many marketing messages people are hit with each and every single day, just the intentionality around who we're reaching out to, reaching the right people at the right time with the right message is paramount. And we know, just like data is the currency for a lot of the customers that we're working with. Is they're all sitting on a gold mine. We know how poor conversion rates are in the industry, and that's becoming more and more difficult with like all of the ways in which consumers are able to now search for homes. Look, the consumers are more educated than ever before, and so those that can understand who their prospects are at a deeper, more innate level are those that we believe will win. And you can now unpack that with data and insights. And what I'm excited to unpack with you, Elena, is just, okay, well, once we have figured out who our leads are, we understand more about them, and we'll go into some of those variables. But now it's like the so what factor. And that's why the relationship with you guys is so exciting, with being able to just immediately set up the communications plans. And that's how we've brought this all full circle for those that are in attendance live, or those that see this webinar after the recording.
Yeah, and I think, kind of framing the word data and what that means. So this, when we hear about the data is important, this is nothing new. Like, we all have a CRM, we all know data is important. Maybe you've created segmentation, but you still have these segments that are still way too large. And like you said, there's only so much time. So previously, we would try to score people based on third-party data from there's companies out there, but it's only third party and you don't really know how trustworthy it is. And then the other flip side is, okay, within your own CRM, you're able to see when people have been active recently. For people who are growing and scaling their business, that list gets way too large. Even when you're trying to say, okay, let's figure out like the behaviors that I think are the most important to track. But I won't spoil the share here, but what you've created is kind of combining all data points and helping figure out who the true people are. And not only that are not true people who are important, not only that, but who are they? Like, who are these people? Like, sure, they're clicking and they have a higher score, but why? Who are they? How are we categorizing them? And how do I personalize my reach out, my message to them?
Yeah,
Hopefully I
I mean,
didn't spoil too much, but
if you just put yourself in the consumer's shoes, like the biggest brands in the world have figured this out. They've been doing it for years. Is how do they personalize their communications to you as a consumer? How we got 5 different generations of buyers and sellers out there, and we had 5 different generations of those that are trying to sell to them in real estate, mortgage, whatever industry that you're in, it's relevant. And so, how do I make sure that my messaging, my marketing materials are hyper personalized? And like you mentioned, right, like in the real estate business that we ran, when we would get leads or open house, they showed up in our CRM system. And then I told my agents to go and work them. But it was like Bob Smith, here's his email. But you don't know if Bob's like 25 years old or if he's 76 and owns 5 properties and is making $1 million. You'd have to explore that, and you'd have to fact find that, which handicapped a lot of us. And with the power of big data, and now you overlay the power of artificial intelligence to create the predictability. I think for those in attendance, the Shiloh webinar that you guys did not too long ago was a good one of how Justin and his team, or I think at Bar Agency, they're already doing personas, right? Well, we can take that a step further by actually using the household level data points. So now you're marrying up all of the greatness that your CRM is capturing each and every single day, the millions of data points, website visits, clicks. You mentioned all those great third-party platforms that we plug in to generate activity. And now the power is, well, how do we disseminate the difference between activity and figuring out intent, and the intent comes to, well, what's actually going on at the household. And there's other businesses that have been doing this as well, where it's fragmented. You have first party or third party data, but you don't have both. And what we've done is we've been able to connect the two. So we marry up all of the great activity that's going on, the properties that they're viewing, and then we're overlaying life event data, credit history, search behavior, which is really cool because now imagine, like, again, consumers have so many different distractions and ways that they're going to shop. And if you can figure out that they're still shopping, even though they're not on your digital storefront, that is huge. And now you reach out, and you're reaching out with the right message that is relevant and personalized. It only helps you increase your productivity, get more conversations started, and helps you just predictably grow. And again, your database, at the end of the day, what we preach for all of our clients are like, you're building a contact repository. Don't let it just be a graveyard that collects dust and one day you set up a referral fee to another agent, hand it off, and hope that they figure it out. How do we make sure that you use the power that is now available to everybody at a low cost to generate more predictable, scalable, and ultimately more transferable cash flow for anybody else? Because that lends itself to an exit strategy or a recapitalization for your business. Those are things that are down the line and not many people think about. But how do I just improve my margins just a little bit by using this information? And we'll bring it full circle, is like all of these tools that we're going to talk about are incredibly powerful. But as your database grows, what happens is you have more people that have to tend to that activity and mine that. And how do we now think about, well, how do I go further leaner, right? How do I, as my database grows, I don't have to increase overhead. I can use the power of some of these tools. And that's our intentionality behind it. And what we're really hoping, catches fire. And you see this, like the trends, all of the leading indicators are there. So, the agents have to be wiser in the value that they bring to that consumer in the marketplace. At the end of the day, it's the data. So those that can harvest, what we're all working really hard to do is we are collecting either with our time via, getting shaking hands and kissing babies and getting people into a database, or money. Like we're paying for leads and those are going into a system. And then we set up communications to go after them. Well, if you're just spraying and praying with a shotgun approach, margins decline. And so we want to help those just bring a rifle to the party to make sure that they can just be more intentional with every outreach so that it has a greater impact on the pipeline.
Yeah, definitely. And before we share screen and kind of dive in and show everything, I wanted to point out that, like the platforms I mentioned, you're doing lead gen through maybe one platform or a company, you're doing nurturing through another nurturing platform, you're doing remarketing ads. And what's nice about this new product that you can take advantage of is it's not gonna not meant to compete or replace anything, but it's gonna be complementing everything you already have. That way you can not only save your time better, use your time better, but also, like you mentioned, Steve, like cost for text messages is not cheap. And so I love that this is going to help people really work a lot smarter and more targeted. So I'm happy to share a screen. Do you, Steve, do you have a preference of who does the screen share first?
Yeah, you go ahead, Elena. I know we kind of took you through what we had, or I'm happy to pull it up as well if we want to kind of give people a peek behind the curtain. Before we get into it, anybody jump into the comments if you have questions. Sometimes when we're talking about data, where it comes from, the efficacy of it, jump in, ask those questions. We get them all the time. And then you mentioned just those third-party platforms. Like, yes, we want to make sure that like every dollar you're investing there, think of this as like your insurance policy. Data-driven decision-making is hugely paramount for whether you're a solo agent, you're a teamridge, you're a brokerage. We're all kind of doing it. And we've just distilled it in what we believe is just a really simple way to do so. And I think those that, depending upon how you register for this, know that what we're going to show you, we're doing free database analysis, like for anybody who wants it. Right. And so that way you can get an understanding of like where your opportunities are, not just today, 12 months down the line, but you get an understanding of not just the opportunity, that's the dollar, but you get to understand like who have you been attracting in your database? First time home buyers, move up buyers, investors, downsizers. What generations of consumers are you attracting? What income levels are you attracting? All of those things that, whether you care about them or you don't, they're actionable. And that's what we want to, we want to help communicate a little bit better here today.
Awesome. Cool. I'm going to click present. Well, maybe you have to do it. Okay, there it goes. So I know upon first glance for the viewers that you might think this is a lot. Like, what do I do with all of these graphs and data? The good news is it's not that complicated. I'm actually going to zoom in a little bit so you can see a little bit better. Is that a little bit better maybe? So at the top, you see the funnel. So this is my CRM. That's kind of what everyone's funnel looks like. You've got a giant bucket of cold leads, then warm leads, and hot leads. That's nothing new. You probably stage people, something like that in your CRM. Agent Legend is doing it through data points instead of stages. And then on the left side, you can see here like how my CRM is distributed. A lot of people in my CRM are real estate agents, so it makes sense why the investors are the highest number of people in my database. But this gives you a high-level overview of the specific types, and it's kind of squished because I did zoom in. It doesn't look that wonky usually. So that's not a UI thing. It shows like you have so many investors, downsizers, move up, and this one says first-time home buyer. And you might think, well, that's great. Like, what do I do with all this information? You've got these breakdowns, this breakdown here, people in your stages. But what we can do with this data is create automated, you might call it like filtering, automated workflows, but essentially we're automating, pushing these data points to, specifically talking about follow-up boss, to be able to know who is who in your CRM. Am I missing anything so far, Steve? Or does that make sense?
Yeah, the key is we are pulling the information and we're running it through. What's happening in the back end for us is we've created hyper localized models. So what a model looks like is we are basically looking at who recently bought or sold. In this case, it's real estate. For those of you, if there's anybody tuning in that are in the mortgage industry, we are looking at who recently refied or had a purchase loan pulled. For any of those in an adjacent industry like home services, we've done some work. Moving, we have some clients in that realm where we're looking at conversion data, who recently hired a moving company. And then we're just looking at, it's a lookalike audience. And so because our data set sits on top of, we have 270 million unique households that we're mapped to. And when we map to them, we have over 1,600 unique data points at every single household that we're looking at. And so what that allows us to do is build these really rich and robust profiles. And sometimes data can just be too much, right? And so we have to distill it down to make it super simple and actionable for all of our clients. And so in the real estate scope, it is, in its truest sense, who is a sales qualified lead, which if you're looking at Elena's screen, right, that's the 247 total contacts, versus a marketing qualified lead. And most people intuitively, we understand this now, is 90% of our database is going to be marketing qualified for the most part. So of the 12,384 contacts, if you look at the top right, we're distilling it down to 250 people roughly. And so what that helps us do, back to the core of what Agent Legend has been for 10 years, is we are a communications platform. And so who do we direct the communications to? We are helping our clients save a whole truckload of dollars by just ensuring that their time and money are being deployed towards those contacts. And so the 247, if you can break that down now into further smarter segments, you have your smart lists and collections. Imagine now being able to set up collections that are sales qualified, marketing qualified, and then you're setting up first-time home buyer sales qualified, move up buyer first time. And now you kind of see those segments take shape, Elena. And that's the power of what your team does, is with your personalized action plans that we've now set up. And now I can set people up based on where they are, not only in the path to purchase, but who they are. And so that in and of itself lends itself to, in our world, right? Proof is in the pudding. We've been running communications and over 15,000 campaigns over the lifespan of what we run with our clients. And we are seeing consistently a 4 to 10 times higher response rate when we're segmenting it this way versus the traditional way, right? Most people are going to have campaigns that are speed to lead engagement, And then it's the then what? The true power of this is going to be in that long-term, midterm nurture where most leads just get forgotten. And you might find gold in there every once in a while, but now our clients or just anybody has confidence that they're deploying the right message to the right people at the right time. So the first thing that you see here, and you see this with a lot of the platforms, is like the first thing is like the data enrichment. So like if you go back up to the top right, you have total contacts. Like Elena, 40% is the match rate of this. So most people need to clean up the data. Like let's get the foundation accurate. So this solution is like an always on 24/7 database manager. And so her job is to not only help you figure out who to talk to and looking at these intent signals and all that great stuff, but we're also going to actively go out and make sure that we get accurate phone numbers, accurate emails, addresses where it's missing. And so that data enrichment is really powerful because you paid for that lead, you got that lead in your system, and it just things get dirty. And we're in Q4 for those, it's Q4 of 2025. And so as we plan for 2026, that's a lot of the work that we're doing here is just cleaning things up. And now it's a matter of deployment after that.
Yeah. Yeah. That's all good stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. And correct me if I'm wrong, Steve, but we all know about third-party data. First-party data, what sorts of data points are you tracking so that you know someone is hot?
That first-party data is one piece of the puzzle. And then when we overlay those additionals, okay, I got name, phone, and email. I mentioned we can map to household level. That's the true power. Now we're saying, is Elena who's looking at that $1 million property? She's actually making $500,000 a year, has 2 kids. She just got a dog, and she's actively buying XYZ on Amazon. Though that's the example of that third-party data set. It's all pooled together. So we're not telling you all that stuff. We can't. And so we pool it together to then that's the lookalike element to say, yes, they're doing the things, the activity, and they're also doing the things that we can't see. And that is what we've now pumped into the system all in one way of like, we've been doing, and I did this when we were in real estate and production, was predictive modeling and propensity scoring. Now we've just, again, it's a newer version of it, given the data that we now have that's readily accessible for a lot less expensive than it used to be. That's the thing. It was cost prohibitive previously. And that's why the largest brands in the world really had access to it. But now that's been able to trickle down to a lot of the small to medium-sized business owners that we're assisting.
Yeah, definitely. So let's dive into what do you do with this data and the tactical part. So I worked with Steve before this to help me with that. And so basically what we did was we said, okay, obviously the most important people here are going to be the hot leads. But like we mentioned, we don't want just hot. We want to know who is who. So we created filters. This is showing the whole list of everyone that meets our hot stage or our hot in the funnel. They have a 90+ score. But then we've drilled out even further and selected, okay, I want to see the hot downsizers, the hot upsizers. So like this is a hot first time home buyer, for example. Now it's going to condense that list to be even smaller. And so what we did was we created these automated filters where anytime first we created it for the existing people, but then we also said, okay, anyone in the future who meets these qualifications, tag them in Follow Up Boss that they are a sales qualified, either downsizer, upsizer, investor. These are just some examples we did. And in real time, within seconds, it did that. So to show you here in Follow Up Boss, and I'll zoom in a bit as well. I pulled the tags that got pushed over from Lily by Agent Legend of the upsizers, downsizers, and the investor owners, and it's only showing the hottest people. So the first thing I would do with these people is create a smart list. Depending on how many people are in this list, you may want to drill it down into 3 separate ones. We do want to be mindful that we're not getting smart list fatigue with too many lists. So up to you on if you want to create one combined one for all of your sales qualified or hot leads that match these parameters, or if you want to separate them. But so far I've just pulled these tags here and it's showing me 53 people. the purpose of the list I'm doing is for calling purposes. So I would make sure that their phone number is good. So in this case, all of them did have a phone number. So the number here didn't change. It's still 53. And then I would save this as a list. You may even want to sort it by last communication or last activity, depending on what is good for you. But I would definitely sort it by one of those two is step one. Then step two is, which I'll show you. So step two is batch email. Step three is automation. So for step two, to supplement your automation of the what I call evergreen content, which is sending emails that is generalized enough to where it's not specifically mentioning what's happening in the market now, you would supplement with batch emails. So I would take this a step further, and you might see this on the left-hand side of my screen. This is what we do internally for us too. We already have like batch email list segments for our leads, for different types of leads, for past clients, and so on. So I typically send like 10 batch emails a day, but I'm not sending one person 10 emails. That's where the importance of segmentation comes in, is creating a hyper-focused content for the right audience to make sure that people are getting the right message at the right time and they're not being overloaded or fatigued from communication from you. So I'm going to show one example of that. Before I continue, Steve, does this all make sense so far?
It does. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. So for the purpose of batch emails, I would send content of what's relevant now, like market updates, and relevant to them and the avatar. So I would separate this out and say, okay, I just want to email upsizers, and I'll create content just for upsizers. So I'd say, okay, I don't need the phone is good because this is for emailing. I would say I want to see people where email is good, but they're tagged as upsizer. Now we want to ensure we avoid that fatigue I mentioned. So right now it has 16 people here. I wouldn't be surprised if this went down to 0 because I sent all my emails already today, but we'll see what happens. I want to ensure we're not going to be emailing people that have just recently been emailed. How aggressive you want to be with emails is going to vary from person to person, depending on what coach you talk to or marketing guru. Some people will say email every day, email 5 times a day. I'm more conservative, up to you. But on the more conservative side, I would filter out people who've received a batch email in the past week. So because they're most likely receiving automated emails through an automation or action plan, I want to make sure that we are not also batch emailing them within the past week. So that just made it go from 16 people to 11. And then because there's multiple ways to track communication, you also want to exclude people who have received an action plan email. Depending on if you're on the automations 2 versus 1, I'm in the 1 in this account. I'm searching for last sent action plan email. You may need to search for last sent automation email. But again, I want to avoid email fatigue. So maybe 7 days or 4 days. So those two get tracked separately. So that's what I'm doing here in these lists over here is I've stacked these filters. So far we're excluding people who have received a batch email recently. They haven't received an automated action plan email recently. And you also may want to exclude people who have received a call recently or talked to recently. So let's say more than 1 day ago, if you called them today, you may not want them to also receive a batch email. And you can do the same thing for a manually sent email. So you can stack and stack and stack. I typically just stack these two and just change how often you want to be emailing people to avoid that email fatigue. So this is pulling up a list of upsizers, and then I would save this as a new list. And now I have my batch email list for upsizers. And then I would do the same thing for the downsizers, the first-time home buyers, and the investors. And so we would essentially be adding like 4 or 5 new lists here if I were a real estate agent and I add this strategy. But I'm not, so I'm not going to save these lists in my CRM. But does that make sense so far, Steve? with what I'm
Yeah.
showing?
Yeah. We've seen a lot of what you went through there, Elena. The IDX websites, for those that are using that, like, think about now sending the right inventory to people, right, based on where they're at, what type of lead that they are. Uh, you know, that has been one that we've seen some users have some good success with, because you, instead of more generic outreach, maybe city based or neighborhood based, you can drill that down even further. We've also seen, just again, where you deploy, like using ChatGPT with, hey, how do I come up with upsizer based content to really make this easier? And then to your point, Elena, is like, okay, that can be email based. How we view emails are like, that's low cost, affordable. So that's like your marketing qualified leads. And then when you get into the communication side of texts or video texts, voicemails, AI text, whatever you're doing, that's when you're able to use short, sweet calls to action that direct them to a relevant email. And so you can use the power, right? Like right now, we're with where we're rolling out in our use of Lily in this case. It's going to be primarily just data driven. And then in the future, you'll see more of like action oriented to make it click of a button and you're able to deploy relevant communications to it and to deploy right back into Follow Up Boss. And that's the joy of we have a two-way integration with Follow Up Boss. So you'll see all of our communications going in and out through there as well.
Yeah. And that's a good point of, since like this list is only 11 people, depending on how crunched for time you are, you may want to go into each person and create that personalized search for them. But so what I would do in this case is I would send a batch email with content of what's relevant happening now. So you can use something like ChatGPT that Steve mentioned. I've created a brand guardian in Claude for this of exactly how I want the emails to sound and the persona to make. But basically, here's an example, and I'll be giving all of my examples away at the end of this. But I'm essentially combining what's happening in the market today with a call to action at the end to make sure it's relevant. I didn't create the email template ahead of time, so I'm just going to copy paste, and I'm not going to worry about formatting. But this is essentially what I created. This is for upsizers, like more options than we've seen in years, so that they know that this is relevant to today and it's not just a standard email. And then saying like, I've noticed something with clients lately, so on. Inventory is up for over 20 months in a row. The selection isn't like what it was in the pandemic frenzy, but there's less competition. And then the call to action, like, I'm curious about your situation. If you've thought about upsizing, which of these sounds most like you? A, B, C, D, or E. That way we're tying in both what's happening now and call to action. Now, I only spent like 1 second on this, so this could have been, I could have spent a little bit more time to craft this with the Brand Guardian a little bit better. But this is just an idea of, I would create content for the upsizers of what's happening in the market and it's relevant to them, another one for a downsizer, another one, and so on. And that's how you start to be able to send 10 batch emails a day like we do, because we're only sending this to 11 people. And then the next group will be 20 people versus one giant batch email to 1,000 people.
Yep. So
and then, go ahead.
Here, Elena, a question from Danielle Haas. So the question was, is this an extension of Follow Up Boss? Do you add these lists on our behalf? So yeah, we technically, the list would, from the segmentation, like the smarter list standpoint, the data is coming from Agent Legend. So what we do, like right now, if you go and you can get a complimentary database analysis, we give you 2 weeks complimentary to actually access this information. We can kind of go through how you can actually segment your own database. A lot of our clients, their businesses of snowflakes, we have like our standardized like best practices of where you can find the most success. That happens once we review that information. So to provide you next steps, I think Rebecca, who's in the chat, provided like a link to Calendly. We'll pull that up at the end. But while it was fresh on our minds and you're kind of hitting that topic, I wanted to touch on it quickly.
Yeah, Rebecca's on our team. Yeah, so Danielle, specifically like Kee Technology, we'll set up one list for you of a combined list that will suit most people. But once you have like a giant database, you may need to separate it out, but we'll create that first list I showed of calling list based on those hot audiences. Okay. So then obviously as people get tagged moving forward, you want to be able to automate your reach out and personalize it. So the batch email example I wanted to show was to supplement the evergreen content you're sending via automation. So because these leads get tagged, and sorry if I'm going too fast if you never went to automations before in Follow Boss, but if you click on admin automations, that's how I got to this page, and I'm creating a new one. Again, depending on what type of account you're in, you may have already upgraded to 2.0. The screen may look a little bit different, but you would click to add an automation here, and we would say, let's create one for downsizers. So these people are getting tagged as Lily downsizer. And depending on what your strategy is, I personally recommend only sending this automated communication to specific stages. That way you're not emailing people that you're currently working with or talking to. That way there's no disconnect, because these reach out emails are acting as if you've either never spoken to them or it's been a long time since you've spoken to them. So that's why keeping your data clean and organized is so important. And that's something that Steve mentioned, is like you can only do so much with bad data. You need good data to allow Agent Legend and Lily to do their thing and score leads and identify people. But also here for your automation, you want to make sure that the wrong person doesn't receive the wrong thing. So we typically would only include people staged as lead or attempted contact if you use the attempted contact stage. You may want to be more aggressive. You may want to say, well, I'll include people in my nurture stages. Maybe I'll include warm or cold, but I'm super safe and careful. And I just include lead and attempted contact, because that's also most likely, like, no CRM is perfect. That's probably going to include people you've talked to and you forgot to change the stage anyway. And then I only want to do this if the email is good. And then you can also say, I only want to do this if I haven't communicated with them in the past week. Again, depending on how aggressive you want to be or not determines, just like with the smart lists and the filters, whether or not you say, oh, I don't care if I just talked to them yesterday, I want them to receive this. Us know if we reached out manually through a call, text, or email, then we don't also want to send this automation. And then you say, okay, if they're tagged as a downsizer, they meet those conditions, then I want them to receive our downsizer action plan. We have a lot of downsizers here. I think maybe I called it something different. Maybe I have so many. I'm sorry. I have one in here that is for, okay, here, downsizing, to reach out to these people. So once you create it, you want to name it and you want to save it. I already have done that, so I'm not going to do that here. But what we did was, I'll show you what it says. For, I think, was it just upsizers I was showing?
I think it was downsizers.
Okay, downsizers.
Yep.
And again, you'll get copies of these ideas at the end of this webinar. And I apologize, my Follow Boss is a little bit slower to load. So whenever someone gets tagged from Lily that they're a downsizer, we also tag them as downsizer, just like plain downsizer, because we use that tag in our nurture automations so that you don't have to worry about that. We just do that automatically for you. We do the same thing for the upsizers and for the other categories. And then immediately once someone gets tagged, they would receive this first email saying, this is like the relationship first name field. So if you have like a husband and wife or partners, more than one person in the profile, it would say like Elena and Chris dash. But if it's just me, it would just say Elena dash, is your home still the perfect fit? And this sends as soon as the lead reaches a 90 or plus score, plus matches a downsizer and gets tagged in Follow Boss. So it all happens in real time. Then we would send this once that indicator is in place, so that we're sending this specific automated email at the right time. So there's nothing you have to do to make sure that this campaign initiates once you create those filters, saved filters in Lily through Agent Legend. So just a simple plain text email. We find that these get the highest open rate and response rate because the email providers and carriers are not suspecting that this is a spammy email. We're not over formatting it. We're not putting a lot of, there's not even a link in here. There might be a link in your signature. Those count against you too. So we try to limit to like 2 links in the signature. And the plain text with the one question, like, is super simple. People are busy. They don't have time to read a long email about why they should downsize. And so if you just send the one simple question, that's how we get the highest response rate. And then a couple of days later, we'll send another email. If you could change one thing, what would it be? So this is just an example. I think ours runs like 1 or 2 years long until the person responds. And we would do the same. We would create another automation for texting. So if you use texting through a platform like Agent Legend, we would run both at the same time to say, okay, we would create another automation with conditions saying they have to have a good number. Like, we don't want the automation to attempt if they don't have a good number. And we'll initiate the email and the text strip at the same time, because some people check their email, some people check their phone number. You never know. We hit them in both places. And when we do, we see about like a 20% increase in our response rates through all of our automations when we do both at the same time versus just email. So that's one example. And then you would do the same thing for the other categories. You say, okay, when they get tagged as upsizer, we would send those specific emails. And again, I'll share all of those free ideas and emails at the end of this. But I think I went through that way too fast though. So let me know if I need to clarify anything or if that makes sense so far.
Yeah. That's it's what you put together is like the then what, right? That's really, really important. And so like that's really helpful. Like we're gonna power the right people, right time. And then now, hey, let's make sure you're deploying the right messages, whatever medium that looks like. So really neat that Elena and her team, they put the time and effort to now say, no longer are we, one methodology is hot, medium, cold, or, kind of that stage based, and triggering off of activity. Now you can do it with a little bit more logic. So another layer of personalization to the entire equation lends itself to better responses, better response rates. More conversations leads to more people added to the pipeline and more closing. So really, really slick. If Elena, is there more that you want to share in Follow Boss, or can we quickly bounce back to Lily? I want to share just a couple of use cases, and then we can answer some questions for the users. Was there more that you wanted to showcase in Follow Boss specifically?
Yeah, there was one more thing I was going to point out. So I know that some of you pay for platforms that charge you per contact, just like you're charged with texting. You want to say, okay, well, I want to use this platform, but I have 50,000 leads. I don't want to pay for 50,000 leads to be nurtured by this platform. You can say in this automation, like, not only do we want to initiate a drip campaign, but if they're not already in this nurturing platform, they need to be now.
That's a lot of what we help with is, hey, I got 50,000 contacts in my database. I'm just starting out on a platform. I'm not ready for the all-in package. Now, which contact should I load in? Use the data, prioritize or suppress certain segments, and then load those in. And you're going to see some better results just because, again, it's relevant. We do this with direct mail campaigns. We do this with, as folks are now trying to, when we're working with like lead gen companies as well, Elena, like we're helping it close the loop. So if you imagine like the circle of lead gets generated, it's a silhouette of a human being. You don't know who it is. Well, we tell you who it is. So that's who the leads are. Sales is more effective. Same with marketing, right? They're going to do their job more effectively because right person, right message, right time, conversion happens. And now the teams are able to analyze those conversions and build smarter audiences that just fuel that machine again. So now you are able to inform the marketing agency to keep generating, and your cost per leads go down. So it's been really remarkable to see how people can leverage this solution. Obviously, all of the action that Elena just walked through is incredibly important. And those are now readily available for those of you who want them, to just plug those directly in so you can get some immediate results. Q4, I mentioned it earlier. We talked about cleaning up the database, but also as you're sitting down, if you're a team leader on this call or a brokerage owner, you can actually in our system go agent by agent, look at their lead lists and help them right? Plan for next year. What's our action plan for the hot leads bucket? What's your action plan for the move up buyers, the downsizers? What's our content strategy? And because now you have not just a pool of leads that you don't know who they are, but now you can build really intuitive outreach engagement plans that just, again, add a lot more intelligence to what we're all doing. So I think that has been fun to see the evolution of how folks are now using this, getting more comfortable with using data. We've always been so used to, like, when I was producing, right? We were really fastidious about analyzing the inventory, right? The properties, giving all the insights on the market, but we forgot about the consumer that we were serving and how do we serve them better. And that's the intentionality behind this bolt-on, this add-on to understanding who's in your database. And then we get to work on spending all the dollars or hiring the appropriate people to work that database. So we can open it up, Elena, if there's more that you want to unpack. I know we're at 44 minutes. We could go and talk for another hour if we really wanted to. Be mindful of, anybody who has questions, jump into the chat now. We're happy to stick around to do that. And I know Elena has some information she wants to share around, like, those that want to get started or want to get moving forward.
Awesome. Yeah, I wanted to just give away those strategies and ideas. I think, okay, there we go. So if you scan that QR code, you'll be given an email with all of the automation links where you can just click and plug in, like, super fast into your CRM for both email and texting outreaches for upsizing, downsizing, and investment property owners. I think each of these includes like 1 or 2 emails or text messages. The text messages work if you use something like Agent Legend to be able to drip text directly in Follow Up Boss. And then if you're looking for more, like, these are just for the first couple, that's where we can give you like a year or 2 years worth for this, and then also for nurturing once you make connection with them. So I'll also put a link.
They're great. These are awesome, by the way. Like, I don't know how much time you spent on them, but like that's gold right there. Elena and her team, like, they've taken you 10 steps ahead of the pack with just those. So that's an incredible stepping stone for those that are just looking for like an easy way to get started, easily plug and play. And so I hope a lot of people take you up on that offer for sure, Elena.
Yeah, definitely. And then if people wanted to learn more about Lily and Agent Legend, where can they go? How can they reach out to you?
Yeah, just go to our website, agentlegend.com. Go there. You'll see calls to action with just like a free database analysis. That's what we start with, because we don't know exactly where to go until we look into the database, right? And so that's where you'll get exactly what Elena had walked through, from like the segmentation, everything that she showed you. We're not gatekeeping, or there's no paywall for this information. We give it to you for those that are specifically on Follow Up Boss. Because of our two-way integration with that platform, you're able to take advantage of tagging and segmenting the database. Do that with your team. You can go through agent by agent within your roster as well and work through that information. That's all complimentary. And then, reach out to our team if we can assist you and clarify any of the information. Sometimes data can be cumbersome, and just how do we make it actionable? But we hope that it is simple and intuitive enough to do so. So,
yeah,
that's awesome.
And the last thing I wanted to say is that we've been working together with the team at Agent Legend so that we're able to create those filters for you, so that you don't have to create that yourself. And then that way you have those as a standard, and then Kee Technology in the back end will set up those automations so that you don't have to worry about doing that yourself. So
absolutely.
I'm sure this was a lot of information at once. Just wanted to point that out, that it doesn't have to be all on you.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I appreciate, hopefully we do this again sometime soon. And obviously, if you have any questions, this will be recorded. It's going to be available on our YouTube channel, all the social channels. And then if you registered and weren't able to attend live, you'll obviously get the recording as you follow up. So Elena, thank you for spending almost 50 minutes of time and going through all this. We really appreciate all the help that you've provided for our team. And hopefully this was informative for everybody else that attended. So have a great rest of your afternoon, everyone. And we'll hopefully talk to you soon.
Alrighty, thanks. Bye bye.